right, hey y'all, welcome to Diner Days again. I'm Governor Jeff Landry, and this is our podcast, Diner Days. And today, we've got a great location, a famous location here in Baton Rouge. We are actually at Phil's Oyster Bar, which this place was featured on Guy Ferrari's Diner, Drive-Ins, and Dives. So I couldn't think of a better place that we could have today's discussion. And joining me today is Jay Grymes, who is actually now the climatologist for the Governor's Office of Homeland Security and Preparedness. And I thought it'd be a great opportunity as we get ready to get into hurricane season, which starts June 1st.
Yeah, just a couple of weeks away. Yeah.
And so I thought it'd be a great opportunity to discuss and to inform the citizens of the state that we actually now have an embedded climatologist at the Governor's Office of Homeland Security and Preparedness. I have appreciated over the last 15 to 16 weeks, especially over the different natural disasters that we've had to deal with. I mean, Jay, I think we've hit it all, right? We've had hurricanes, we've had tornadoes, a snowstorm. Whew.
Yeah, you've hit the gambit here. Flooding, as well as, the river was high, so we had all kinds of action going on. But that's not all that rare for the Bayou State. There's something weather-related going on every season.
Well, yeah, I always say that if you want to really talk about climate change, you can do it here in Louisiana because the climate changes on a daily basis. But why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself, kind of walk us through the progression of how you, from where you started to where you are today.
All right, well, I'll go all the way back to 85. I grew up in Delaware and got my 2 degrees at the University of Delaware. While I was finishing my second degree, which was in climatology, I'd been working on human health related aspects of climate, as well as biological aspects. And one of the things I was doing was looking at how insect populations vary on a year-to-year basis with the climate. Well, the entomologists here at LSU heard about my work and they invited me down.
You got plenty of bugs.
Yes, indeed. And this was actually an agricultural pest, and we were trying to see if there was a weather linkage to the outbreaks of this pest. So I came down here in the summer of 85. Was a student, graduate student for 1 year, and at the end of that year, the university offered me a full-time job. So I went to work for LSU in 86. In 91, I became the state climatologist, round 1. From 91 to 2003, I was the state climatologist, and during that spell, Channel 9, the CBS affiliate in Baton Rouge, reached out to me to do some weekends. I said, okay, I'll give it a shot. And so that's what started the TV gig. And in 96, I started part-time TV. In 2003, Channel 9 said, hey, we want you over here full-time. And so it was 2003 that I shifted from LSU to television. Did 21 years as the chief meteorologist at WAFB. And then you called.
Yeah, look, I got to tell you, when I became governor, to me, the biggest issue that governors can face at times of natural disasters. It's when people really need their government more than at any other time.
That's
it's
right.
The basic function of what government does is certainly when communities, sometimes whole-scale parishes or multiple parishes, or in times of despair, we need to bring as much of the resources that the government has to bear to those particular sites. And for me, the ability to predict what could be happening and to be able to adjust those resources are important. And so, I remember when we first started talking about it, we said, hey, look, maybe Jay would come and just work for us full time, where we'd have you embedded. We could basically have you on our ticket rather than on multiple tickets. It's what piqued my interest, and I got to tell you, it's been great.
Well, I appreciate that, and as I told you before, you gave me a great opportunity to move to a new career late in my history stage, and I've enjoyed the opportunity here. It brings me back to my Louisiana roots. I'm the state climatologist, round number 2. I'm mainly at GOSEP, as you know, but I've also got a short-term appointment back with LSU, where we have the state climate office. So one of the things that you've given me an opportunity to do here is to bridge LSU and GOSEP and to make sort of a seamless link between the university campus, the university's expertise, and the needs of GOSEP in terms of serving the state. And the other thing that's really worked out remarkably well, and timing is everything, as you know, LSU has just this year been approved for a coastal meteorology program.
Oh, wow.
So we're actually going to train meteorologists on campus that will be able to further enhance the needs of weather and climate monitoring that you're looking for through GOSEP.
Well, you know, it's real interesting that you said that and that LSU is looking towards a new degree or a new study in coastal meteorologist. But I think that one of the things that's been interesting, especially J. Grymes 2.0, if I call it, as the state climatologist second round, is that, you know, I think it's been important to me and it's been beneficial to both me and to the citizens that are out there. Let's talk about the snowstorm, for instance. So at that time, remember the president was getting inaugurated. I had left and I was in Washington, D.C. for the inaugural festivities. We started to see and y'all started to predict that we may have a snow event in Louisiana. And of course, as the days or the hours progressed, the severity of that snow event went up. And of course, I was in D.C., certainly didn't want to be stuck in Washington, D.C. and have a major or unusual snow event happen in Louisiana and be stuck out there. And I can remember calling and saying, so Jay, tell me again, like how much snow can we get? Do you remember that?
I do, and you know, one of the things in my business, you never predict records. We knew the numbers were going to be high, but we didn't realize until really almost 0 hour how significant it was going to be. And remember, there were actually two factors there. We're talking about a major snowstorm in the southern parishes and the coldest weather in over 100 years. Back-to-back events that were both 100-year events. Putting those together into a single event, well, Governor, you win the hat trick for experiencing what I believe to be the most significant winter event in history for Louisiana.
Wow. You know, because you and I talked about that. And yeah, I remember calling you. I think it was it was the night before the inauguration, and I had to make that decision. And you saying, look, this thing is setting up to be a record snowfall event plus the cold that's come behind it. And I made a call, and Sharon and I left at 5 o'clock in the morning, grabbed an American flight, came into Baton Rouge with no problem, and like 6 hours later, that's when I guess hell froze over here in Louisiana. Right, yeah. I guess you could say it.
Yeah.
But you know, let's just talk about that. Because I remember you and I talking about the record snowfall, which we had about 100 years or so before. I remember you telling me that I think it was in Rain, Louisiana, they had gotten like 14 inches of snow. I don't remember exactly what it was. It might have been more than that, but it was an unusual amount. And we were talking about it, and then lo and behold, we end up with these double-digit snowfall amounts across the state. And of course, we had the governor of Arkansas at the time sent a bunch of snow plows in. But again, like you said, it wasn't just a snow event that occurred. It was the record cold that preceded it. And did that happen back when the prior record snowfall happened?
It wasn't as cold. The previous record cold event was a dry event. The previous record snow event wasn't nearly as cold. So putting those two together, second snowiest event on record, second coldest event on record. That's why I say when you put the two of them together, this really was the granddaddy of winter events, especially for South Louisiana. Along the I-1012 corridor, there's nobody alive who was alive back then for either of those events. So this is certainly a lifetime event.
Well, I tell you, look, now that we've cooled ourselves down, we can heat ourselves up because summer's around,
yeah,
and hurricane season is getting ready to be upon us. Any thoughts on how the tropics may look?
Here's what I tell people, Governor. In the last 20 years, we have been ground zero. Yeah, last year Florida was a terrible year for them, but we also had Francine, and we had the backside of Burl that got northwestern Louisiana. When you look at the last 20, 25 years, we're averaging one named storm each and every year. And in fact, in those last 25 years, we've had 3 or 4 seasons where we've had 3 or more hits. So the short answer is...
We're not going to have any this summer, right? Is that the short answer?
No, I'm afraid, Governor. My line of thinking is exactly the opposite. I think we need to be prepared. Well, first off, you always be prepared. But I think there's a really good chance, based on recent statistics, that we'll have at least one storm impact us. And most of those Big Daddy forecasting teams that come out early, most of them are saying the central Gulf Coast is likely to have 1, 2, or maybe even 3 storms. Now that basically we're talking about from Houston over to say Pensacola, but we're right in the middle of that, and that usually is not a good place to be.
Well, we're talking about preparedness. We certainly want to remind everyone out there that GOSEP has a great app called Get a Game Plan. We always encourage folks to download that app and start to take a look at it.
Yep.
Start to do your hurricane preparedness now. Hurricane season will start June 1st. We'll make an announcement on that as well. I think that folks in Louisiana, especially after you just went through the last 25-year history of hurricanes here in Louisiana, shows you why you should be prepared. We can always pray and hope that your predictions are wrong.
I'd be good with that.
I know, me too. I sure would be too. You know, one of the things that I found odd was last year I started looking, especially after Florida had gotten hit so many times. I went back and did a research of all of the hurricanes that have impacted the United States. And I didn't realize, but Florida has actually been impacted by more storms than Louisiana over time.
That's true, but Florida's coastline is 3 times longer than Louisiana. If you break down the coastlines and rate the landfalls per mile of coastline, Louisiana gets hit more.
See why I like this guy? Every time I try to see a little sunshine, he makes sure to inform me that there may be some rain coming, but that's his job.
Well, and that's the fact. And that's why, as you point out, now's the time for people to get ready. Look, we've had enough storms in the last 20 years that you know what you need to do. So it's just get it done. And if you get it done now, you won't have to worry about it in August.
Well, Jay, look, we really do appreciate you joining us today for Diner Days here at Phil's Oyster Bar. Great place to be. We're going to get to enjoy maybe some fresh oysters here. Yeah, we'll get some great oysters. And of course, the folks in Louisiana will be getting notices from us, and at least they will know as we get into hurricane season that the state has a climatologist on board that is updating our GOSEP office with the most accurate forecast of weather events as they happen. You're always in touch with the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Agency, that is NOAA, and other, and I'm sure you speak to other climatologists and meteorologists around the South as well, and we do appreciate your service. Please tell your wife I said hello.
I certainly will.
And let's just hope that your prediction stays as minimal as possible, but we'll see.
Well, let's hope it does. And Governor, I can't thank you enough for the opportunity to serve the state. So I appreciate it.
Well, thank you.
You bet.
We're back at Diner Days, and our second guest today is a great, long time friend of mine who started off as my good friend as Lieutenant Molbert, retired as Lieutenant Colonel Molbert, Harold Molbert, who's joining us today, one of our great wounded warriors here in Louisiana, works with the Purple Heart and the military art of the Purple Heart. And him and I have known each other, God, I don't know, 30 years?
30-something years.
Yeah, unbelievable. And so I thought it would be befitting that as we approach Memorial Day, that we would have a discussion and talk to about some of the great things that our veterans, such as yourself, are working and doing in our community. And why don't you tell the folks out there in Louisiana how we met?
Well, it's interesting, folks. I was telling some people previously, I met you were only about 18, 19 years old, and I asked you one day in the National Guard, we had gotten mobilized for Desert Storm 1, and I don't know if we had Fort Hood or Fort Polk, and I asked you what you wanted to do when you grew up, and instantly you responded, I want to be governor one day.
Is that what I said?
So every few months, after every drill, I'd ask you that once in a while, and you still wanted to be governor. And I don't know if you remember this, one day I said, well, Jeff, at what age did you think you wanted to become governor? And you said, about 13. And what fascinated me next was, I said, well, surely you come from a family of money, or family, extended family that's involved in politics? And you said neither one. You joined the Guard like I did for tuition exemption and to serve your country.
Right.
And you ended up getting a degree and achieving your goals. And I'm just very proud of you and to see you as a public servant. And you've done a lot of great things for our state, and you continue to do a lot of good things for our Louisiana veterans. Veteran buddies out there in Wyoming and other states that are jealous. You know, the insurance discount that you came up with and other things, and you continue to do great things. So we appreciate it.
Well, I tell you what, I really have always enjoyed it. I can tell you, sometimes I figure I'd have been better off knowing the governor and being the governor. It's a tough job, not as tough as the one that y'all have done. You know, it's funny, you talked about the tuition exemption that the National Guard had back in the late 80s and early 90s, which brought a tremendous amount of young people to join the National Guard at the time. We've made so many great friends. Of course, our Adjutant General, Tommy Freelou, and I, and you served together. So did our Colonel of State Police, Rob Hodges. But you were over at the 256 with me when the 256 was activated for the first time. I think it was the first combat brigade, National Guard brigade, to be activated for combat since World War II back in the 90s when we first got it.
Yeah, first time for the 256. But I think we were one of 3 brigades that were mobilized.
Right, at the time.
Mississippi, an artillery brigade, and I think there was an armor brigade out of Georgia. But yeah, this was historic because they had never mobilized the 256 before. We didn't quite make it to the sandbox, but as you know, the brigade deployed in Afghanistan in 2005, and again, I don't know, 2010 or earlier. But when I worked at the Pentagon, especially after 2005, the 256 had a great reputation of doing a great job in Iraq. And you know, you always try to mix humor in with the military. The 141, the artillery battalion from New Orleans, they still celebrated Mardi Gras in Iraq. They had some kind of parade throwing beads. I heard it was a good time.
Oh, well, you know, that's a great thing about folks from Louisiana. And Louisiana has had a long tradition of sending great men and women to serve our country, both in times of need and at times of peace and through natural disasters. You've had a very distinguished career in the service. I, of course, went on and went to college and then went to work and started a business and law school and then ended up serving in the public service, both as a member of Congress, then as Attorney General, now as governor.
Why didn't you go to officer candidate school?
You know, I wasn't as brave as y'all.
I don't know. When I mentioned your name to Colonel Washuspak, he's a long-time colonel that oversaw the OCS program. And when I told him that I was invited to work in your transition council, he said, 2 days later, he said, Harold, I looked through all my books and my computers. I can't find a Jeff Landry that went to OCS. I said he never went to OCS.
No,
he didn't want to.
Right.
I think he had other bigger and better plans.
Well, you know, look, we always like to have great folks like y'all to lead us. But I enjoyed my time as an NCO and as a sergeant. Met so many great folks, but again, didn't spent 11 years in the National Guard. You spent how many in service?
Close to 30. To 30.
And you were in Oklahoma?
Yep. So I served about 15 years part-time in the Guard, and the second 15 went active duty, active Guard and Reserve, starting in Oklahoma, and went up to the Guard Bureau and worked at the Pentagon up there for about 12 years.
And you've seen a lot of action. In fact, you were in Oklahoma during the bombing?
Yeah, it seems like trouble seems to find me. I'm just a regular grunt infantry trigger guy. And, the 30th anniversary of the Oklahoma City bombing was just last month, the day before Easter. And I really wanted to go. President Clinton showed up, but my wife really wanted me to spend time with family. But that was a life-changing moment. I had just transferred to the Oklahoma Guard because my job with Maytag, the loneliest man in town, transferred me to Oklahoma City. And about 3 months later, the bombing happened. And on the 19th of April, in the afternoon, I was called and said my 85 infantry guys out of a detachment in Cushing, Oklahoma, which has the largest intersection of pipelines in the country.
Right.
Cushing. And said, that's right, and said, you and your guys are going to show up here at 6 in the morning. I didn't know what the mission was, but it turned out to be horrific. A mission that we weren't really prepared for. You know, our nation wasn't at war. PTSD wasn't talked about. It wasn't a thing. The mental health community was just trying to figure that out after the Vietnam War. We called it shell shock or battle fatigue, the 1,000-yard stare. So, you know, it's not natural for young American men to see dead bodies and to even take a life. So our job was, once they removed the bodies from the Oklahoma City, the Alfred P. Murrah building, there were 168 people that were killed there. And the last one, Sandra Levy, was from New Orleans. I think she was in the military at the time, because there was a recruiting office. It was the federal building. So once they removed the bodies, the FBI and ATF still wanted to find all of the evidence that they could to try to find out who did this. And they brought the rubble to an offsite location, and we helped the ATF build shaker boxes topped with chicken wire and search for the evidence. We found the first evidence that tracked it down to that Ryder truck. We found the VIN plate that was blown off the rear axle.
Wow.
So we found all the evidence they needed to convict McVeigh and Terry Nichols, the blasting caps, the debt card, but more horrifically, we picked up about 450 pounds of dismembered body parts. And the worst, Jeff, the worst were the kids, because there was a daycare in that federal building.
That's right.
On the second floor.
Yeah.
So I didn't know how to handle this. I'm an infantry guy. So that afternoon, I had 3 tents set up at that site. And the next morning, I was able to find a chaplain, a psychiatrist, and a psychologist that came out. And my guys that had the toughest times were the ones that had kids at about that same age.
Oh, yeah.
And so did I. I had a 3-year-old daughter, but as an officer, I can't just walk away and quit. So the guys, the young men that were single in college, they did okay. The old ones that some were grandfathers, but the ones that had kids that age, we sent most of those guys home. And I tell you, looking back, we could have done a much better job of trying to help them. They gave us business cards, the psychologist with the state, and said, you know, call us if y'all need us. Well, you know, young infantry guys, young American soldiers, they're tough. They don't like to admit that they might need help. Looking back, what I should have done was had some mental health counselors at the drills, every drill, in some offices where the soldiers could go, you know, non-attribution and talk to these professionals if they wanted.
Well, you know, you kind of hitting on a number of the issues that folks in military life, especially those that see combat or see tragedy, deal with in unfortunate circumstances. And of course, as we get to Memorial Day, which is coming up, and then we have Veterans Day, you know, people sometimes get confused between the two. You know, why do we have Memorial Day? Why do we have Veterans Day? What your thoughts?
Well, you're right. I got a lot of questions what the difference is. And it's a fun time. You have a 3-day weekend. A lot of people spend time with their family and cook outdoors and, you know, maybe barbecue, boil some crawfish. And over the years, they asked me, what can they do to pay back to veterans? And it's a very common question. As you know, we have 5 great veterans homes, nursing homes in the state of Louisiana. And if anybody wants to find out where they are, they can just search on the internet, LDVA, the abbreviation for Louisiana Department of Veterans Affairs. And there's 5 of these nursing homes. And all you have to do is show up at the front desk and give them your driver's license and ask them if there's any veterans that would like a visitor. There's a lot of veterans that may not have relatives and no one else to talk to them. So it's a good way for them to give back and just to listen to these soldiers. So if you barbecue on Memorial Day, why not 2 or 3 o'clock in the afternoon, bring a kid with you and go visit a veteran and find out at the desk what some of the needs are for veterans. The one in Jennings, of all things, they said they could use extra soap and shampoo for the veterans. Don't know why they're short-ordered, but that's something, you know, obviously anybody could help them with that. So Memorial Day, I've got some notes because, you know, we talked about this. I have a brain injury from the IED that wounded me. And I like to say having a bad short-term memory is not too bad because I get to go and watch the same movie 3 times over the course of a weekend.
And enjoy it all the same.
Enjoy it every time. That's right. And we should have stock in 3M because my wife, thank goodness, she's a special ed teacher, and she's really helped me through the years with compensatory strategies, and we've got 3M sticky notes all over the house. So again, thanks for having me, Jeff, Governor Landry. Some of the questions I hear, again, what's the difference between Memorial Day? The Memorial Day originally began after the Civil War, and it was originally came up with on the North. The South didn't quite like it just because the North came up with the term, but they first called it Decoration Day. So it was a day in which they would go to these cemeteries, because as you could imagine back then, they didn't have lawn care companies to take care of these cemeteries, and they would go and clean up the graves and the graveyards, and eventually it become known as Memorial Day. And in 1971, it was declared a federal holiday. So Memorial Day commemorates those Americans who died in defense of our great state and country, and the Veterans Day commemorates everyone that served in our military. This is an interesting one. Veterans Day comes from World War I, when the Allies and Germany sat down and agreed to end the war. An armistice was put in place, and the war stopped at an agreed upon time on the 11th hour of the 11th day of the 11th month. So that's why Veterans Day is always on November 11th, regardless of the day it falls on during the week.
I might have to go. We're gonna keep putting you on dining days.
So what's the Purple Heart? The Purple Heart is one of
let's talk about that for just a second. Because you have been, of course, you received the Purple Heart, and
Yep.
it is one of the oldest medals granted, the oldest granted to those serving our nation in the armed forces and then wounded in combat. Not only are you a Purple Heart recipient, but you also are very active in the Military Order of the Purple Heart, something me and you, and this year, I don't know if folks out there know that, but when we opened the session this year, right after I concluded the state of the state and the opening of the session, we went into the Senate chamber for a historical once that the Senate had never opened a chamber for this, and we actually awarded or pinned the Purple Heart on 2 veterans that received the Purple Heart. So why don't you talk to us about the Purple Heart and the Military Order of the Purple Heart?
Sure. So General Washington wanted some way to recognize soldiers for merit. So it wasn't originally designed for people that were wounded in combat. It was just for service, somebody that went above and beyond the call of duty. And it was simply a small purple cloth, like a swatch. And years after, it just kind of faded into memory. And in the early 30s, it was brought back into service and further redefined before World War II.
Oh, wow. So the Purple Heart,
Had
the
died off.
awarding of the Purple Heart had kind of faded out. And it wasn't until after World War I.
Correct.
Wow. I did not know
It was
that.
General Douglas MacArthur that wanted to bring it back. And do you know who the first person to receive the Purple Heart?
No.
General Douglas MacArthur.
Really? Oh, you brought
So I brought a Purple Heart to show you. And if you look on the back, now remember I told you this is for, unlike all other awards that you'll see on somebody's chest, it's unlike all other awards. All other awards are for service, for valor, heroism. This one is given strictly for sacrifice. And but even to recognize General George Washington back in the day, that it was still originally given for military merit, they added that on the backside
for military merit.
So,
And they put General Washington on the
that's right.
on the picture of it.
Bust of General George Washington.
And I tell people this is one of the awards that we hope we give fewer of.
It's the one that you should never be proud of. Despite all my struggles I had, humor has to be part of it too. And when they wrote up my award, my commander told me in Afghanistan, don't ever brag about a Purple Heart. I said, why not? He said, well, it just means the bad guy was a better shot than you. Right?
That's military humor.
That's right.
For those folks that I.
So one good thing they did, the military did, I think probably in 2005, was also award the Purple Heart to veterans that were diagnosed with a traumatic brain injury. So a physical injury to the brain. There was discussion maybe 15 years ago about maybe awarding it for post-traumatic stress, and that didn't pass for several different reasons. But the traumatic brain injury is an important one, and that's one of the medals you gave out to this veteran. So we still run into veterans that either don't know they qualify for the Purple Heart, or they just never took any action to get it, to receive it. Let's see.
I tell you, I certainly have enjoyed our relationship throughout the years. I know that you're getting ready. You've been working on a book.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Yeah. When do you think? When is it? I saw the cover. You sent me a
I'm
couple
about
of sites.
two-thirds finished. I've worked on it on and off for 30 years, and with the 30-year anniversary rolling around the day before Easter on the 19th, it really motivated me to try to finish it. And the title of the book is Those Changed Forever. And if you ever go to the Oklahoma City bombing memorial, the mission statement of the memorial is it's a place to come here and remember those who were killed, those who were injured, and those whose lives have been changed forever. And that event changed the trajectory of my life. As governor, you're aware of this, and a lot of the public still doesn't know, but because of the Oklahoma City bombing and the first World Trade Center attack in New York and the Aum Shinrikyo nerve agent attack in Tokyo, the president and Congress directed the Department of Defense to stand up what we refer to as a weapons of mass destruction civil support team. So we started off with 10 teams aligned with the 10 FEMA regions in the early 2000s. And then the second year we rolled out 17 more, which I was a part of one. I left Maytag and went active duty in the Guard and Reserve in Oklahoma. It was a big change, but I enjoyed the challenge. And right before my 3-year tour, I was asked to go to Guard Bureau and take over as the training operations and doctrine officer, which is a very challenging job. But right before we went, you remember the space shuttle crash in Texas? They called up 5 of the CSTs, including the one in Louisiana, because when the shuttle crashed, there was still a lot of devices and tanks that had different chemicals, volatile organic compounds and such. And the states and NASA wanted us to go out there and try to identify it and make it safe if possible. So that was quite an interesting mission. And then moved my family up to the Guard Bureau and started riding the train to the Pentagon. That was a great experience. And
so the book's actually going to kind of work through your years.
Through the bombing. And it's not so much about me, Governor. It's about all the great Americans I met along the way, like you. And you know,
about that, but you have had an unbelievable career, a very distinguished career, and like all soldiers who have had a long career like you have met some great people along the way, have seen some unbelievable tragedies, and have had to deal with folks under some extreme difficult situations, whether it would be the Oklahoma City bombing, Hurricane Katrina, Afghanistan, Iraq, the different places that you've served. I look forward. We're gonna have to get you back when that book gets published.
I appreciate it.
You know?
Yeah, I find America, when we're attacked and almost brought to our knees, what's amazing, it's not about gender, color, or politics. It's just about doing what's right, saving lives, and trying to mitigate damage. So I hope this country can continue to heal and come together under the leadership of our president and yourself.
Well, I can tell you this, my good friend, Lieutenant Colonel Molbert, on this, as we come up upon Memorial Day, I say thank you for your service, as well as everyone in Louisiana in this country. We owe a debt of gratitude to folks just like you who have served when our nation has called us, whether when we're faced with terrorism here on the homeland or whether we're fighting enemies on foreign soil. We have been those that have stood in the breach and stood for freedom. And in a cold, dark world, I tell them that it is the American service member, he or she, that takes up the call and gives us the freedoms and liberties that no one else enjoys in the rest of the country. So I hope you have a great Memorial weekend, and do appreciate your time today. I tell you, we're gonna have some great seafoods, and we got some oysters coming here at Phil's Oyster Bar, which is where we are doing our podcast from. We always end, I got to tell you this, we always end with a little lanyap. I mean, you know, being from Acadia, that you are. We talk about a little lanyap, something extra to sweeten the day up. And of course, that's what our lanyap is actually our great, brave men and women who have served. And so as we come up upon Memorial Day, I would like to think that our lanyap of folks just like you, it's just the extra that you've given us and those that have served. And I hope that everyone in Louisiana remembers that as you enjoy Memorial Weekend. I'm hoping that we have a pleasant Memorial Weekend. Summer seems to be upon us now, but I hope everyone gets to share some time with friends and family and maybe go out and visit our veterans in the veterans' homes that we have sprinkled around Louisiana, or ask what we can do. We got a great program through our Veterans Department. Charles McGinley and Andrew and them are working on the boot. I know you've been
we work great with them.
Very, very instrumental in helping us. Thank you for your time in the transition. And I hope that everyone gets to enjoy the freedom and have a little fun as we remember the gratitude that folks like you have done. And so that's our lanyap today. And we're going to get ready to enjoy some oysters, and that's coming. So if you can stick around, we'll do that.
Okay. It was a huge honor to serve. Thanks for having me on, Governor Landry.
Well, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Here we go. Look, we're going to have our oysters. Oh, look.
Lanyap.
See, this is the Diner Days tribute to our veterans, just like you. We get
So
to
you do
enjoy.
this every Tuesday?
We knock out and put it out on Tuesdays, Wednesdays, Thursdays. It just depends on the day that we can get guests out, or is our time. And
Hi,
and tell us your name.
my name is Celeste.
Celeste, thank you so much. We have some of Phil's famous.
Original garlic butter char grilled oysters, which won Best of 225.
Oh, the best 225.
Yes.
And how long have you been in business so far? Total?
45 years
Wow.
plus.
That's amazing.
Originally on Government Street.
Yes.
When Gus owned it. And they shut down in 2007. And he passed away shortly after they shut down. And about 9 years later, his son Anthony opened this location on Perkins. And that was in 2016.
Wow.
And it's been great. It's a great place, great oysters. We're going to enjoy some. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Can I get you anything else, gentlemen?
Good.
This would be great.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, for Diner Days. Well, Carl, we'll just enjoy our day today with some great oysters. We hope everyone has a great Memorial weekend. Take care.